That's going really slow today. Don, do you want to start with the introduction?
Welcome to Sephardic World, brought to you by the Sephardic Genealogical Society. Welcome to our patrons who make our meetings possible. Welcome to our viewers on YouTube. And I appeal to them, if you are watching us, please subscribe. Jews have been present in North Africa for more than 2,000 years. Today, Raquel will talk about Berbers, Toshavim, Megorashim. What are the ancestral origins of Moroccan Jews? The study on the Y chromosome of nearly 215 Moroccan Jewish men, carried out by the Avotaynu DNA project, will try to answer this question. Raquel Levy-Toledano is a French MD, PhD, Sephardic Jew, born in Morocco, and very much involved in research on Moroccan Jewish genealogy. She is a board member of the Cercle de Généalogie Juive, where she leads the North African group. As a co-administrator of Avotaynu DNA, the founder of a genealogy society known as Centre Juif Marocain et Algérien, and of the Généalogie des Juifs Marocains group on Facebook. Because there are few sources and documents on Moroccan Jews, she set up this Facebook group, encouraging the more than 12,000 members to build a tree and to collaborate on Genie. And she has done all of that in the last 4 to 5 years. Welcome, Raquel.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you for this nice introduction. Thank you, David and Todd, for inviting me to your weekly meeting at Sephardic World. I will share my screen. Okay. So I will talk about the ancestral origins and the genetic diversity of Moroccan Jews. But before doing so, oops, does it work? Yeah. I will give you an overview of the waves of migrations of Jews, and especially the ways they arrived in Morocco. So I'm not a historian, so bear with me. It's a very simple overview. After the destruction of the first temple in 587 BCE, the Jews went mostly east, but some of them went west through the land and probably reached Morocco. At least some Tunisian Jews claim that their origin is that they left the Middle East at that time, and others may have reached the west of the Mediterranean Sea through the sea. The first documented migration of Jews out of Judea to North Africa was mentioned by Julius Flavius, who reported that Ptolemy had expelled about 1,100 Jews from Judea to Egypt. And from there, we can think that they went west and they could have gone to Morocco. Then the most important exodus of Jews from Judea was after the destruction of the second temple, and after the Bar Kokhba revolution, and they might have reached Morocco through the land, going through Egypt, etc., and reaching Morocco then, or by sea, going first in Italy and from there to North Africa or to Spain. But we'll see that Moroccan and there were exchanges between Morocco and the Iberian Peninsula. Then in 700, the conquest of Arabs might have brought some Jews with them from the Arabic Peninsula, and there might be some Jews in Morocco that went through the Arabic Peninsula. Finally, I was telling you that there were constant back and forth between Morocco and Spain during all this period, and even before the expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1391 first, and then mostly after the Inquisition of 1492. At that time, the Jews went all over the place, from Spain to north to France, and then could have gone to the Ashkenazi country, to the Netherlands, and to Portugal, where they were expelled in 1496, and mostly in Morocco. And that's the main wave and the main emigration of Jews that had happened since in the last 2,000 years. There were also constant back and forth between Morocco and Algeria, and you'll see later that there are a lot of common lineages, Y lineages between Morocco and Algeria. So all these migration and the fact that Jews had stayed in several countries might explain the genetic influences of these host countries from the Middle East, because that's where most of them were originated, from the Balkan, from North Africa, Italy, Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, and from the Maghreb. So that was my introduction to explain how all the Jews that arrived in Morocco had traveled and how they got there. I will tell you about DNA. I'm sure that you are all very familiar with DNA, especially with genealogic research using DNA. As you know, DNA is the genetic information that is transmitted by the parents to their offspring. It is contained in the chromosome. We all carry in our cells 46 chromosomes, which represent 3 billion base pairs. 22 pairs of chromosomes are transmitted by both parents. Each parent transmits one chromosome to the pair, and that is called the autosomes, and we carry 44 autosomes. Our parents transmit also the sex chromosomes. So as you know, there is the X and the Y chromosomes. Women carry 2 X chromosomes. They transmit an X chromosome to their offspring, whether they are their son and their daughters. In women, because they carry 2 X chromosomes, these chromosomes recombined at each generation, and they are not that useful to study genealogy. And the X chromosome is transmitted by men to their daughters. And finally, the Y chromosome, is transmitted by the father to his sons. Because it is a single chromosome, it does not recombine, and thus it doesn't vary, at least not major variation during time. The subtle variation that occur on the Y chromosome are actually useful to time branching between two X chromosomes. There is another structure, DNA structure, that is not very well exploited for genealogy, which is the mitochondrial DNA. It is contained in the mitochondria that are in the body of the cell. It is a very small segment of DNA, 40,000 base pair compared to 3 billion base pair of the autosomes. So, and it is transmitted by the mother to her offspring. So it is not very useful now to study origins because it varies. It doesn't vary throughout time. Each mutation occurs every few hundred years, so it is not very useful to trace a matrilineal line. But yet it is tested, and we have tried to study it, at least in the North African and also in Ashkenazi population. But for now, the conclusion are not. We cannot conclude about the matrilineal line with the mitochondrial DNA for now. So this slide summarizes what I just told you about the DNA. So the autosomal DNA is useful to identify genetic cousins with a common ancestor that can go up to 5, 6, 7 generations. Above that, it is too, the DNA is too fragmented and too spread out in the genome to be able to recognize and to see the correspondence. But what is interesting with autosomal DNA is that it might identify all the ancestors or a lot of ancestors, even the one with whom you don't share either mtDNA or Y chromosomes. The Y chromosome is interesting because it helps identifying the patrilineal line, meaning the father of the father of the father, as you can see here, but it is only one ancestor out of several hundred. Likewise, mtDNA is helpful to identify the matrilineal line, the mother of the mother of the mother, and likewise, it identifies the line of only one ancestor and ignores all the other ancestors. So it is important to note that because some people will define genetically themselves either through the Y DNA or through the mitochondrial DNA, while these two DNA ignores all the other ancestors. So let me tell you a few words about Avotaynu Foundation that is financing and doing this study. Its objective is to identify the male ancestors of contemporary Jews by analyzing the Y chromosome. The study was initiated by Adam Brown in 2000, and at that time it was only on Ashkenazim, and it was not really a structured study. But in 2016, Adam founded the Avotaynu DNA Foundation to study mostly non-Ashkenazim Jews in collaboration with the Technion in Haifa. So to date, we have in the Avotaynu database, there are about 12,000 individuals that were tested, of whom 7,500 tested their Y chromosome, including 1,700 big Ys, and more than 2,000 tests were funded by Avotaynu, including about 600 big Ys, and Avotaynu is aimed at testing all the lineages that have been identified so far. So it's about 700 lineages that will all have one big Y. These tests were done at Family Tree DNA, and you can visit the website of Avotaynu on the avotaynuonline.com. Before going to the core of my presentation, talking about patrilineal ancestral origin of Moroccan Jews, I'll show you all the lineages that we have identified so far in Avotaynu. So the total lineages that we have identified is about 678, of which more than 550 lineages are non-Ashkenazim, and 134 are Ashkenazim, and we tested about 5,000 Ashkenazim, so we believe that we had identified all the Ashkenazim, or almost all the Ashkenazim lineages. So you can tell that there are much more non-Ashkenazim lineages than Ashkenazim, as much as we haven't tested all the non-Ashkenazim population yet. The common lineage between non-Ashkenazim and Ashkenazim, there are 47 common lineages. Most of them have been originated in the Middle East. So in this study, we enrolled 381 participants, 247 Moroccan Jews, 95 Tunisian Jews, 39 Algerian Jews. We identified 165 lineages among these 381 participants. So if you compare to the Ashkenazi population that has been tested by Avotaynu, where we tested like 5,000 and identified 140, a bit less than 140 lineage, you see that in North African Jews, there are a bigger number of lineage, so probably a much higher diversity. In these 165 lineages, 80 are specifically Moroccan. We don't find it in other population. 37 are specifically Tunisian, and 14 Algerian, and 35 are shared among the three populations. Sorry, when I say that there are specifically Moroccan, Tunisian, or Algerian, I mean that they are not shared by the three populations, but they might be shared by Ashkenazim or other Sephardim. If we look at the number of lineage by country, in Morocco, we identified 107 lineages, meaning that we identified 80 lineages Moroccan and 27 that are shared between the three populations, 58 Tunisian lineages. So if you account that we tested only 95 Tunisian, it means that there are probably a lot of lineages, Tunisian lineages, that we haven't identified yet. Same with the Algerian population, we identified 34 lineages in Algeria. So what is the geographic distribution of origin of these Moroccan Jews and these lineages found in Moroccan Jews? So 12% of the lineages were originated in the Iberian Peninsula, 9% in Greece, 6% in the Maghreb. And this is important because the Moroccan Jews were thought to be descendant of Berber that converted to Judaism, and this shows that this is not the case. And 70% were originated in the Middle East. Very few in Europe, 2%, and 1% in Africa. So 2/3 of lineages of Moroccan Jews were originated in the Middle East. Now, if we look at the number of individuals and see where their Y chromosome were originated, we see that 5% were originated in Iberian Peninsula, 8% in Greece, 3% only in Maghreb, and 82% in the Middle East. Why is that so? Because the Iberian and Maghreb lineages that do not contain a lot of individuals, probably because they are more recent lineages than the Middle Eastern lineages. Now, if we compare with Ashkenazim, we see that there were the influence of the country where they lived, as we saw the influence of the Iberian Peninsula for Moroccan Jews. Here we see that there is an influence of Europe in the Ashkenazim lineages, and about 16% of the lineages were European, while we see about the same percentage of Middle Eastern lineages. So again, these are the most ancient lineages, and you'll see that it is also the largest lineages, because if we look by individual and we compare between Moroccan Jews and Ashkenazim, you see that in Ashkenazim, then we have 88% of the Ashkenazim that were tested that had a Middle Eastern Y chromosome. So, as you know, the Ashkenazi Jewish communities were formed between the 9th and the 10th and the 11th century. Some of these Jews came from Spain, going through France, or from France, and going to Germany, and from Germany to the Ashkenazi country, or could have come through the land. From the Balkan, etc. We identified 18 lineages that are shared with, 18 Moroccan Jewish lineages that are shared with Ashkenazim, with a branching that is very old, more than 1,000 years. And I believe that these they branched after they left the Middle East, or soon after they left the Middle East. These lineages are mostly of Middle Eastern origin. We haven't found any Iberian lineage, Moroccan lineage, that is common with an Ashkenazim, with an Iberian Ashkenazi lineage, but it is not impossible that one day, if we test enough Moroccan, we'll find one. That's not unlikely. So now, if we compare the lineages, the Moroccan Jewish lineages with Moroccan Muslim lineages, this is what we observe. This is a bibliographic reference, so I didn't have the detail of all the lineages, but at least it seems obvious that the Moroccan Muslim descent, mostly from Maghrebian carry mostly Maghrebian Y chromosomes, and they have about 9% of Middle Eastern Y chromosome that could be brought by the Arabs, although I could not compare the specific lineages with those of Moroccan Jews. I don't think that we'll find a lot of common lineages between Moroccan Muslim and Moroccan Jews. You can see also the influence of Africa with 13% Moroccan Muslim lineages coming from Africa. But yet there are shared lineages with Moroccan Muslims. We have identified at least 5 lineages that are shared between Moroccan Jews and Moroccan Muslims. Each of these lineages correspond to a distinct Jewish lineage. These are of Jewish origin. It is not Jews that, it is not Muslim that converted to Judaism, but it is rather the ancestor was Jewish. It could be, this could come from the migration of Jews from the Arabian Peninsula or from recent voluntary conversion. We know some of descendants who can trace their ancestor who was Jewish recently in the last 200 years. But most of them, I believe, come from forced conversion in Morocco that took place in 1130 at the time of the Almohad. At that time, all the Jews, especially from the north of Morocco, were forced to convert to Islam, and this had lasted for almost a century, where there were no Judaism in Morocco, or at least in the north of Morocco. And later on, when the Merinid took the power, they were allowed this this new Muslims were allowed to convert back to Judaism. And finally, they were the first Marranos of all times, since they continued practicing Judaism, and they were identified as new Muslims until they could go back to Judaism. From these converted Jews to Islam, some didn't come back to Judaism and continue to be Muslim, but these are called the Bildiin in Morocco. They distinguished themselves from the Moroccan Muslim population until very recently. Most of them know that they descend from Moroccan Jews. Most of the time they married, they stayed a close community and married among their community in a way that they are quite close genetically from the Moroccan Jewish population. Some surnames are even shared with Moroccan Jews. Until now, there are some El Cohen or Ben Zekri or others Jewish surnames. We haven't tested them, but I believe that if we tested them, we will find that they carry a Jewish Y chromosome. I also looked at correspondence with Y chromosome correspondence of Moroccan Jews with West Sephardim, and we found that 31 lineages out of 107 were common with West Sephardim, of which 12 were common with Ashkenazim, and they were all, and most of them, but I would say all, of Middle Eastern origin. And nearly half of Moroccan participants of this study have a West Sephardim, so-called West Sephardim Y chromosome. So can the Y chromosome distinguish between Megorashim and Toshavim? Megorashim are the exiles, the Jews that came from Spain after 1492 or 1391. And the Toshavim are the resident, and are believed to have been in Morocco for the last 2,000 years also. As I told you before, there were constant back and forth between Morocco and the Iberian Peninsula, so it's very hard to say whether they share a Y chromosome with Sephardim or with Iberian people because they were exiled from Spain, or because it was a more ancient stay in Spain. Anyway, from the 100 or so ancestral lineages that we have identified in Morocco, about 40, for about 40, we have some clues evoking that they have an Iberian, not an Iberian origin, but that they stayed in the Iberian Peninsula for some times, especially those who share Y chromosome with the West Sephardim, and we believe that most of them are Megorashim. We have identified very few Toshavim lineages, about 5 or 6 of them. Generally, there are very large lineages. And that's why we believe that I have been in Morocco for a long time, and they don't match with other Sephardim. And we believe these are almost confirmed Toshavim lineages. There are others that are not confirmed because there are too few people in the lineages to be able to know whether they have stayed in Morocco for the last 2,000 years, or if they had traveled to Spain back and forth. So in any case, the distinction of Megorashim and Toshavim is, I believe, is more religious and cultural than genetic. So what did this study teach us about Moroccan surname? There are very old Moroccan surname, probably from the Middle East, dating that had be adopted in the Middle East, such as Cohen and some Levi, not all the Levis, because I believe that there were not so many Levi in Morocco, and that some people, some men had took the function of Levi in the synagogue, and they ended up being called Levi. However, there is at least 1 or 2 lines of Levi that are, and including my Levi line, that are old Levi, probably because they match with Ashkenazim Levi. We found several Sephardic surnames that probably were adopted prior to the expulsion from Spain. These surnames are Toledano, Haliwa, Benatar, Pinto, Amiel, El Moznino, Corcos, so known Megorashim surnames. However, there were some Berber sounding surnames that were believed to be Toshavim, and that turned out to be Megorashim. That's the case of Ziri or Zrien. Zrien, for instance, being my mother maiden name. So I always believed that there were Toshavim. There were no specific custom in the family that could, they were from Marrakesh, so not from the north of Morocco. And actually, they carry Y chromosome of that lived in Spain and was expelled from Spain. There are large Moroccan Jewish lineages with many surnames. Those are the Toshavim, what I believe Toshavim lineages, with some surnames that are very close, such as Chetrit, Street, Abitbol, Botbol, etc. And a lot of surnames that are very common in Morocco. And finally, there are some lineages containing only one surname that are so-called monogenic lineages, such as Malka, Assoulin, or Amiel. So a few words about the Kohanim from Morocco. We identified in Avotaynu several branches of Kohanim, of which one major lineage of Kohen with most recent common ancestor that have lived about 2,700 years ago. In the Moroccan Jews population that was tested, there were 16 or 17 people belonging to that lineage with 8 distinct sub-branch, meaning and branching in very early time. And I believe that those are 8 distinct sub-branches that came separately from the Middle East to Morocco, either from Spain or directly. We cannot distinguish whether they are Toshavim or Megorashim, but it's not one Kohen that arrived in Morocco and had several descendants. It is different branches and different ancestors that arrived in Morocco. We have in this major lineage, if you are familiar with Avotaynu, it is called the AB022 lineage, that belong to this. We have 6 non-Kohens, Moroccan, Jewish Moroccan, not carrying the Kohen surname that belong also to this major lineage. And finally, there are several Kohen, several Moroccan Jews carrying the surname Kohen that do not belong to any Kohen branch. I'm looking at the time, perhaps I'll tell you one story about one of these Kohen. We found that one of these Kohen had correspondence with the major El Fassi lineage that is believed to descend from Yitzhak El Fassi HaKohen, who was born in Morocco, in Fez, and that's why he carried that surname, the surname El Fassi, and died in Spain. And this, what I believe is that this Kohen is a parallel, this Kohen branch is a parallel branch of this El Fassi branch with a common ancestor prior to Rabbi Yitzhak El Fassi HaKohen. We also found some Y chromosome correspondence with the Shwetas. So the Shwetas are Jews from Mallorca that converted to Christianity after the Inquisition. They lived, in a very close community. They married within the community, and they kept a very homogeneous DNA that is very close to the Jews. And what we found is that some Shwetas lineages were common with Moroccan Jews, with a most recent common ancestor that lived about 1,000 years, 1,000 years ago. And it is known that King Jacques I, around 1200, invited the Jews, some Jews of Morocco and the Jews of the Kingdom of Aragon to go to Mallorca to become merchant. And there are even some documents from Mallorca, from the sailors of Mallorca, written in Arabic. So what I believe is that these lineages originated in or lived for a long time in Morocco before going either to Spain and then to Mallorca or directly to Mallorca. So now an unexpected Y chromosome correspondence is a person residing in India that had correspondence with a large cluster of Moroccan Jews, of Moroccan Jewish Y chromosome branch, probably a Toshavim branch, with tens of Moroccan Jewish surname, one Moroccan Muslim, one Algerian, one Tunisian Jew. And when we contacted that India man, he told us that he was belonging to the Church of St. Thomas, which is a big community in India, a Christian community of Syrian origin, and that his Syrian ancestor arrived in India between the 12th and the 13th century. And actually, from the genetic data, we can tell that the most recent common ancestor of the Moroccan Jewish cluster and this Indian Jew is Indian, is probably around 1100 before present, 1100 years before present. And what I believe is that this was a Moroccan Jew, perhaps a merchant who traveled in India. Perhaps this was also during the forced conversion, and he fled to, who traveled to Syria, and he fled to Syria. From there, he had a Christian descendants who populated this Christian community in India. So I will tell you now about the genetic diversity of Moroccan Jews. So I told you about all the host country genetic influences. So we won't be surprised if we found some remnant of DNA in Moroccan Jews that come from this community. This is very empirical. It's not scientific at all. But I was curious to look at the ethnicity breakdown of Moroccan Jews and compare that with Ashkenazi and Moroccan Muslims. I used MyHeritage because that is the company that has the best identified Sephardic DNA. In other companies that, for instance, in Ancestry, I think you cannot, or 23andMe, I don't know which one of these company, they don't distinguish, they don't discriminate Sephardic DNA. And if you are Sephardic and you want to do a DNA test, either you transfer your DNA to MyHeritage and you'll have more, or do you test it at MyHeritage and you'll have a more accurate ethnicity estimate than in other company. That's the result for Ashkenazi Jew. For Ashkenazim, you see that almost all Ashkenazim carry 95 to 100% of Ashkenazi DNA. If we look at Moroccan Muslim, they carry between 75 to, the mean is 80, 85, between 70 and 95% of North African DNA. And now looking at Moroccan Jews, we see that there is a very large diversity. And here I'm talking about autosomal DNA. The mean Sephardic DNA that we found in Moroccan Jews is about 50% or less. And they all carry some Ashkenazi DNA, which I believe is a remnant DNA that were common to Ashkenazim and Sephardim, but long before our time. They all carry some European, South European DNA, whether it is Italian, Sardinian, Spanish DNA, some Middle Eastern DNA, and a few percent of North African DNA, but mostly it is much more diverse DNA than the one observed in Ashkenazim or in Moroccan Muslims. So why such a genetic diversity among Moroccan Jews? Probably because, as I said earlier, it is poorly characterized, because there are few Sephardic and especially Moroccan Jews that were tested, or it is close to South European DNA. It could be also due to the large number of founding ancestors, especially male ancestors. And this, we have seen it with the number of patrilineal lineages. There was also a slow demographic expansion of the Jews in Morocco, and especially if we compare to the number of Ashkenazi Jews and the number of Sephardic Jews. It can be due also to the constant migration of Moroccan Jews, and we can see that also from the Y chromosome correspondence. And also, we don't know what is the ancestral origins of the founding mothers. It could be that the male, when they left the Middle East, the woman, the woman didn't leave the Middle East with them. So in conclusion, the patrilineal ancestral origin of Moroccan Jews is mostly Middle Eastern, with multiple ways of migration. We found ancient genetic connection with other Jewish communities. The theory of a Berber ancestry of Moroccan Jews turns out to be false. This study is to date the largest study on Moroccan Jews. And finally, question mark about the founding mothers. I'd like to thank Adam Brown for allowing me to collaborate with him on this study. It was fascinating to work on the genetic and the Y chromosome of Moroccan Jews. And I'd like to thank also Wim Pennings, who helped me with all the classification of the Y chromosome, etc. And I thank you for your attention. Merci beaucoup à tous.
Thank you. That was quite incredible. Do you want to stop sharing
Yes.
your screen and we can have questions? Before we do, just to everybody who is watching us on YouTube, 85% of people who watch our talks are not subscribed, so please subscribe. It helps us a lot and costs you nothing. Raquel, first question is, have you done any comparison, say, between Moroccan Jews and communities such as Baghdad?
I haven't personally. There are few lineages that are common especially the Kohanim, that are common with Mizrahi Jews. There is a large study undergoing on Mizrahi Jews in Avotaynu, and I know that this population has a different profile of Y DNA compared to Moroccan Jews. But if Adam is online, perhaps he can give more information.
Adam is, yes.
Well, Raquel, that was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Raquel's been working on this for several years. And I want to mention, Raquel, that Family Tree DNA has dropped the cost of their mitochondrial DNA test by about 70%. So you and I have been discussing this for about a year. I think we're getting ready to start doing that.
Great.
Okay. Once we get, we're about to finish up our Y700 study, our big Y study of our existing samples. The answer is very sort of interesting, which is that because of the Bar Kokhba revolt and the impact that the Bar Kokhba revolt had on the population, the Jewish population of the Middle East, we don't think we're seeing one unified population, David. We don't think we're seeing the whole picture. And I think what we are seeing is reservoirs of survivors. Okay. You know, think about the Shoah, right? And you had reservoirs of survivors. You had certain populations that thrived. The biggest reservoir of survivors of the Shoah were the Jews of the Pale who came to America before 1922. So everything we know about the Jews of Europe, we know because, for the most part, because of the people who came to England and America, you know, and South Africa before 1945. So we can't study the Jewish population of Europe because we don't have the Jewish population of Europe to study. It was decimated. But we can study those reservoirs. So what we think we're seeing is that Morocco is a reservoir of survivors of Judea who got out of Dodge, who got out of the Holy Land before the catastrophe, or a series of catastrophes, right? And we think the Mesopotamia or Iraq is another reservoir, because we are seeing the Kohen lineage everywhere from Afghanistan all the way to Morocco. And their common ancestor lived 2,700 years ago. So we know we're looking at the same population, but little hints of it in different places. So that's what we're looking for. We think Yemen is another potential reservoir, and the Yemeni community is a nut we're trying to crack. If we can get into the Yemeni, it's a very close-knit community with a certain degree of well-earned fear of outsiders. And so if we can crack the Yemeni community, I think we're going to see a lot of things there. Another one is the Italian community. I think we're going to see a lot more connections to the Italian community and the Moroccans, or at least certainly the North African community and the Italians. But we have the same issue with the Italian community. It's a very difficult community to get it in test. A very proud community, and something we're working on. So that's the answer to that long-winded answer to that question, which is there are tentacles in common which demonstrate to us there's much more than that sees the eye.
Yes.
And that's what I think we're seeing. We're seeing this very complicated, interesting structure.
Thank you.
And Raquel revealed a bunch of things I didn't know, so thank you.
Another question before I hand over to Ton, and it's a very specific question. I'm very fond of a rabbi who comes from Djerba in Tunisia. This is sort of an island off the Tunisian coast, and apparently they have a door there that they claim to have bought from Jerusalem during the time of the destruction of I think the first temple. I'm not sure, but yeah. Is there a particular, because I think that was quite an isolated community. Is there a particular sort of signature for isolates like that if they were isolated?
We haven't tested enough Jews from Djerba. Okay. Perhaps few in our Jewish Tunisian sample. But what I can tell is among the Kohanim, the AB 022, the main lineage of Kohen that we have studied, there is not one single Tunisian Jew.
Okay.
Considering that there are a lot of Kohanim in Jerba, and that the Kohanim of Jerba belong to another lineage of Kohen, while most of the Kohen of Morocco and the large lines of Kohen, such as the Kohen Skali, etc., belong to the major Kohen line. So it could sign a different population.
Okay.
I want to mention one other thing before you give it to Ton, David, is that Raquel and I are just sort of the tip of the spear and whim of this project. There's a very deep reservoir of people who are working with us on this. We have to mention Mark Fellows in Paris, who tested the Tunisian for us, and Jacob Marache and others. There are dozens like them all over the Sephardi world who've been our shlichim. So I'm sure Raquel and I want to thank them for their work as well.
Yeah,
Thank
I thank
you.
them.
Ton, do you have a question? Ton, you are muted.
Not to mention Michael Wass, who also is part of our team. Raquel, thanks.
I have one remark that's stems from Alexander Beider, who talked to us about North African Jewish surnames. His conclusion was also that this thing about Jews in Morocco descending from Berbers was a myth, and he based that on surnames. He said there were very few Berber surnames among Moroccan Jews. So that fits well with your conclusion.
Perfectly fits. In fact, Ton, the names, when he said a certain name was Spanish, was a Megorashim, and a certain name was Toshavim, he was right. The DNA proved him out in every circumstance thus far.
Nice. And I have a question about Gibraltar. Did you also test Jews from Gibraltar? Because there were many connections between Gibraltar and Morocco.
Yes, we did. Not a lot. I think a handful of participants that were from Gibraltar, so it's difficult to conclude. Most of them had common correspondence with Moroccan Jews. It didn't seem to me that it was a specific population, especially the Sephardim.
And the same question about Amsterdam Jews. I know from records in Amsterdam that there were, I think, about 10 families that lived in Amsterdam for a time, then went to Morocco, lived there for a time, came back, etc., etc.
We have checked few at least we have checked at least 2 lineages with the same surname in Morocco or in Tunisia and Amsterdam. And actually, one of the person I tested, it was through you, Ton, and we found that they have the same Y chromosome. And in our study, there are few people from the Netherlands that were tested, and they have correspondences with Moroccan Jews or other Sephardic Jews.
Are you still looking for Dutch Jews to test?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are looking for basically families or lineages that we have not previously tested. And we know we've just scratched the surface on. And part of our problem, of course, with the Dutch is the effects of the Shoah, right? And so we don't find them in Amsterdam, we find them in Suriname, or Barbados or Curacao. And so that's how we've gone about that task as well.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions on YouTube, David?
Yes, several, but I'll put Anita's first because I know her. This is actually something we were discussing before the meeting. She's asking whether all the Toledanos are related to each other or not.
The Moroccan Toledano
Yes.
most probably. At least I've tested one. We tested like 3 or 4 Toledano from Morocco. One that I could not locate on the Toledano tree, and they all have the same Y chromosome. So if we cannot locate them on the tree, we know they all descend from the same ancestor who was Rabbi Daniel Toledano, who arrived from Saloniki arrived from Saloniki in Fez in 1610 with
Thank
his
you.
2 sons.
There are several questions about Ashkenazim possibly having Sephardic ancestry. Of course, this was discussed in some detail at the IAJGS London conference. Is there any, first of all, is it possible to prove, where there is common ancestry, where they branched? That's to say, is it possible to say, first of all, that Jews may have gone from the Iberian Peninsula to Lithuania or Poland or Ukraine or wherever? And secondly, is there any evidence that that has happened? I'm sorry, I have to ask because several people have put these questions.
Okay, before Adam, just one thing is that there is 1 or 2 common lineages between Sephardim, and this is a Spanish originated in the Iberian Peninsula, between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. Because I went through all the lineages and I identified at least 1 or 2. But then Adam is more, will probably give you more answer because he had studied that.
Also, I want to separate out, like, first I have to define the term Sephardim, Raquel, because I want to drill down on that. There are Jews whose lineage, who are Iberian origin, okay, whose families have lived in Iberia for an extended period of time, such as mine, that lived in Iberia in Roman times, that clearly entered the Ashkenazi population around 800 AD. Okay, I would not call that a Sephardi lineage; it's an Iberian lineage. Okay, and there are a number of those, and then I would refer to what I guess people would consider a Sephardi lineage, which is something really after the rise of what we think of as the golden age of Iberia. Okay, so I'm going to narrow that even further: exiles from Iberia after 1391. The only time I've seen exiles from 1391 in Eastern Europe, and there may be some, but there really are identified as Ottoman. Okay, so we have a certain percentage of Ashkenazi lineages that are clearly Ottoman in origin. Okay, they came up at some point after the Ottoman conquest of southeastern Europe, at the very tail end of the 15th century, into the 16th century, and into the 17th century when they were expelled. And we certainly see evidence of those in places like Romania, Slovakia, Galicia, Hungary. There's no question. And they probably and some of them identified as Sephardi for a long period of time, because Sephardi was the dominant culture of the Ottoman Empire. But to call them Iberian descendants, we haven't seen that yet. I know Kevin Brooke has written about the families who went to Zamość, and we've looked into that. One of the problems with DNA is unless your family was really successful, over 500 years, it's going to vanish. Your trace, you're going to daughter out, right, Raquel? We've seen that. So to say that a family that lived in Zamość in the 17th century, maybe 20 people, is going to still show up in the Ashkenazi profile, unless they were very successful, these families, we're not likely to see it. So, and I know that David and Ton did a tour de force at IAJGS in London this year on this subject that absolutely blew us away. Okay.
Well, with Michael and Randy Schoenberg.
Michael and Randy as well. I mean, but Ton's data on money flowing into the Sephardi communities of Eastern Europe, or the lack of it, was really an extraordinary piece of data that absolutely amazed me. I mean, the idea that the Sephardim of Amsterdam are giving money to every Sephardi community in the world except Poland, okay, suggests that, you know, it's the dog that doesn't bark, as Arthur Conan Doyle would say. So that the answer to my question is we have not seen evidence of a stream of Sephardi DNA into Eastern Europe, but there's certainly plenty of Iberian DNA and there's plenty of Ottoman DNA. But we haven't been able to, we haven't seen direct links of post-1391 Sephardi DNA in Eastern Europe, unless, Raquel?
I think there is one or two lineages. We need we'll look into it.
We can look into that. I do know there's one that's Christian in Belarus that appears to have been a Jewish trader who went to Belarus, converted to Christianity, and settled there with a Jewish name of Harlab.
If you said something very interesting. If say there were 1,000 Y lineages 2,000 years ago, how many of those Y lineages would we expect to be surviving today? Is it possible to estimate that?
We haven't taken that on. You know, if it was a natural progression, David, we'd be able to do it. Yes. But there's been such severe pairing, you know, through war and epidemic and genocide. It's very difficult to make that calculation. If we have 700 today, there must have been thousands then.
Yes.
Every population we've looked at, we've seen a decline in the number of Y chromosomes in that population, just because of what's called genetic drift in a small population.
Yes. Thank you. There's a lot of, if anybody on Zoom has any questions, please just raise your hand or just start speaking. I'll just see. There's a lot of comments on YouTube. We have quite a large audience there, but most of these are very, very specific.
Can I say one other thing, David, which I would just want to mention? At the time of the Late Bronze Age, or following the Late Bronze Age, when the Jewish population formed up, it formed up from a very random Middle Eastern population that was in the middle of one of the great migrations or mixings of populations in human history. My wild-ass bet is that if you were to look at every single lineage that existed at that time of the Late Bronze Age, there was a Jewish participant from that lineage. Okay, that's just my guess, because this population was so randomized and so mixed, ending up in one place. I believe you could have had thousands of Jewish Y chromosomes at that time.
Yeah. Are there any, Raquel, you mentioned an individual in India. Are there any sort of other sort of outliers like that that are the curiosities?
Hawaii.
Yeah, the kid that fell from the boat in Hawaii, but I haven't identified a lot of them because I studied mostly Moroccan Jews. Yeah. But yes, there is a study that I'm trying to start, is the Capo Verde Jews. Descendant, Jewish descendant from Morocco, and I'm planning to test them to confirm the correspondence, the Y chromosome correspondence between Moroccan Jews and them.
Because if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, if I'm not mistaken, there was also a community in Senegal on the Petite Côte.
Yes.
Is there any sort of genetic? I mean, I suppose you would need to test that quite a lot first.
We would need to test them, but when I went to Capo Verde, And there they showed the people that died in the prisons in the Petite Côte. They showed the name, and there were a lot of Moroccan Jewish name, unfortunately.
Yes. Is there in any likelihood going to be a way that one can extract genetic information from burials without disturbing the burials? Is that too Star Trek, or?
There have been some studies, and actually, what I believe that they've asked rabbis about that, and they were allowed to take the teeth and to extract DNA from the teeth, right, Adam?
Yeah, well, that was not quite what David's talking about, but yes, there was a studies in Erfurt, Germany, where the rabbi permitted them to take, as long as the sample was not deliberately excavated, right? That it was something that happened anyhow. They were given, and as long as the community agreed to it, they were given permission to take a tooth, as long as it was not connected to any other part of the body. And that was a great study. So, have we talked about Erfurt yet? It's not a Sephardi study, but it's a great study that maybe I'll talk about sometime if anyone is interested, in which they found several dozen skeletons and different white chromosomes. And I'll give away the punchline now, which is every single white chromosome found in the Erfurt cemetery is found alive today in the Ashkenazi Jewish population. And but the answer about whether you can dig down into the soil, to put an auger into the soil and come up with DNA, that's what they're doing in ancient DNA studies in these caves. So you won't be able to identify necessarily a particular individual, but you could certainly identify a community of DNA.
Yes. No, but I'm thinking about sort of cemeteries from hundreds of years ago where we often will know the names of the people buried in a particular spot, but I suppose the Bet Din would never allow anything to disturb them. So
I don't know.
Yeah. Raquel, one last question from me. You were saying that my heritage was better for identifying Sephardic DNA. I mean, I'm afraid I come from a very cynical position of sort of garbage in, garbage out, and the sort of haplogroups and the marketing department said, well, we can't market that. What else have you got? But I'm of course not informed. I mean, how good are these percentages, do you think?
No, in any case, they are not accurate.
Yeah.
But they are better than, I'm talking about ethnical breakdown and percentage, right?
Yeah.
Not about the DNA test itself, which is not very accurate. You can study a global population, perhaps, but individuals, when they tell you that you are 36% Italian while your 8 great-grandparents are Moroccan Jews, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, but if I compare the percentage of my heritage and family tree DNA, for instance, in family tree DNA, I will find, for myself, for instance, I will find 15% Sephardic DNA, and in my heritage, about 50%. But still, 50% is not Sephardic, is Italian, Spanish, etc.
Well, we've discussed the problem of the reservoir population, right, David?
Yeah.
There is no Western Sephardi population you can test. You can't go to Spain today and test the Sephardic Jews of 1492.
Yeah.
So every company has the problem of figuring out who they have. And I believe most of these companies use the Turkish Jewish population as their representative of the Sephardi population. So maybe that, and I think we've recently added some of our Moroccan results anonymously to the family tree DNA. And they were reasonably accurate. But again, you take it with a grain of salt. To us, the most important thing in autosomal are the matches you get.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's the most
If
important.
someone comes to me and they have an Israeli name that's been changed and they have no idea, and they match all the Dweks and the Gindis, okay, and the Esses families, I know they're from Aleppo, okay. If they match the Benzakens and the Levi Toldanos and all these families, I know they're from Morocco. So to some extent, your matches are reasonably useful going back 4 or 5 generations. The question about the Ashkenazi Sephardi split is we can tell from a Y chromosome almost instantly whether you're an Ashkenazi from a lineage elsewhere, from a Sephardi or Mizrahi lineage. We can tell immediately because we understand the Ashkenazi community. And if you're not part of one of those Ashkenazis, those 140 Ashkenazi lineages that Raquel referred to, we know you're not from them. The odds are, wherever you are in the world, most of the time you'll match a lineage we already know about. And we'll be able to tell you pretty quickly what community you came from.
Okay, one question that is often asked, which is not really Sephardic, it's not Sephardic, is that almost everybody in Europe seems to come up with, when they do a test, 1 or 2% Ashkenazi Jewish. Is that because it's true? Is it because of background noise or some other reason?
It's true that a lot of Jews have converted to Christianity over the last 1,000 years, and they now identify as Christian, and they have Jewish matches in the Jewish world. It would be my guess. Don't forget, there were 10 million of us in Europe in 1900.
Yeah, my question though is 1 or 2% background noise, or is it false when you have such a small original population such as the Ashkenazim? Is it meaningful?
I wouldn't say that it is meaningful, 1 or 2%.
Frances is waving her hand actively down there.
Well,
Okay, Frances, unmute yourself.
Okay, all I wanted to say is that they married each other. My father came from Lithuania, my mother from Egypt, and from a long way back, they were kicked out of Spain at the appropriate moment, which we all know what it was. And so, I mean, they did meet and marry each other, and there were other ways of accidentally, probably when the barriers were very strong, it was less likely. But certainly, my parents, I had a very large Ashkenazi family, mostly in South Africa, fighting about racism. Some of them were racist and some of them were fighters. And an Abulafia family in Didsbury in Manchester. So that was my kind of vision of the world in a way. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'm specifically asking about sort of a non-Jews. So you can get a sort of Rimsky-Korsakov in Russia and a sort of Smythe Fuchs Harrington in Berkshire in England, and they all seem to have 1 or 2% Ashkenazi. And the question is this real? Is this some sort of Jewish conspiracy? Jewish control of the of the DNA media, or is it just because so many Jews have assimilated and intermarried over the years that this is something real across Europe?
1 or 2% is someone who lived in 1800. It's like 3 great-grandparents, 3 times great-grandparents. We're talking a very long time ago. And so I'm going to say my first instinct is usually it's an error. And my second instinct is there was somebody who had a common ancestor with you who identifies today as Jewish, and that person is in the reference data panel of one of the companies.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm afraid there's a lot of very specific questions from viewers on YouTube. I would invite them just to search on YouTube, and there's a lot of very good introductory talks there. I'm sorry, I've rather dominated. It's a fascinating subject, absolutely fascinating subject, Raquel. And yeah, I guess we're still very much at the early stages because
yes.
I'm guessing as we go forward, many more people will test. So honestly, I promise this is my last question. Are these tests going to get more sophisticated? I mean, I remember sort of 10 years ago, people were talking about junk DNA, meaning it's sections of DNA they didn't know what it was for. If we can currently sort of work out, back to 6 generations or so, is it going to get further than that, or is there other stuff that is going to finally work its way through to these commercial tests?
You're talking about autosomal DNA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, Raquel, I think that when whole genome sequencing exists, and we've barely scratched the surface of using whole genome sequencing for genealogical purposes, and you're looking at a database of, as Raquel said, what, 3 billion nucleotides, Raquel? There's no human on Earth who can compare 3 billion nucleotides. I say we don't know what AI is going to make us capable of doing. All right. If with AI, Raquel and Adam can have 3 billion nucleotides thrown at each other, we may learn all kinds of interesting things that we're not seeing right now.
And what happened is also during the generation, the segment that we inherited from our ancestor is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and you cannot identify where it comes from, because if it is too small, then it can match with any other segment. So perhaps with the AI, we will be able to reconstitute this a longer segment from this small segment, but I think there is a long way to go.
Yeah.
So that's probably 3 years or 5 years. Everything is going so quickly. But
I mean, the one discovery, David, is that we all came from the same population. All right. And if we're all tied together, if you go back far enough, I mean we as Jews, but of course we as human beings.
Yeah.
But every time we look at this, we get back to the same conclusion, which is we keep seeing these threads going back to the same place. And each of us, if you were to test, what do we have, Raquel? 680 Y chromosomes.
About.
Probably each one of us has several hundred ancestors living in 1700. You would find every single one of those Ashkenazi lineages in our background if you were to do that test. And every one of those 230 Moroccans and Tunisians and Algerians, I have no doubt that if you went back in time, you would find that every one member of that population shares all 230 of them. That's just how it works. And we just can only see this one little sliver. As Raquel said, we self-identify by our mitochondrial and our Y DNA, but all the Y DNAs that she looked at are probably present in the ancestry of all the Moroccan Jews who she's tested.
Exactly. And actually, sorry, but actually by testing all these Moroccan Jews, what we did also, we did autosomal to them. And we noticed that they are all related. And I'm related to all these Moroccan Jews that we have tested. So we probably share a common ancestor a few hundred years ago.
How many of the people that you tested, and I'm talking about people with a known Sephardic family tree, turned out to have no Jewish ancestry?
In general?
In general.
Our entire study? A fraction. A handful.
Very little.
Usually as a result of a non-paternal event. Okay, very small.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was just asking too many questions because it's such a fascinating subject. I do apologize to everybody on YouTube. We can't get to all of your questions. If you would like to become a patron by going to patreon.com and looking for Sephardi, you could then join us here on Zoom and ask your questions directly. But thank you very much, Raquel, and also Adam.
My
it was
pleasure.
absolutely fascinating, and yeah, we can. This is going to just be a total revolution.
And I can talk about it for hours too.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully soon you can come back and do so again. But Ton, would you like to close the meeting?
Yes. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Raquel, for your lovely talk. Thank you to our patrons who are here with us on Zoom. You make all of this possible. Thank you to our viewers on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And in 2 weeks' time, we will have Benjamin Lee, and he will talk about the digital humanities and the Ladino press. I hope to see you all in 2 weeks' time.